Welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Button AI Strategies for UX. We're writing a Substack, we're working on a book, and we're also live streaming this. Well, I guess it's kind of like a podcast, you could say. But we are live streaming this show to hopefully make your life easier and help you with any AI and design challenges that you encounter. Okay, so everything should be working, everything should be live. And I just need to make sure I mute my tab so I don't hear myself. Perfect. All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to talk about when design thinking meets prompt engineering. And for today's show, I got with me again, Reza Mugavi. Reza, do you want to just introduce yourself real quickly again?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Leonard, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Reza. I am currently a postdoc at the University of Waterloo, working together with Leonard. My research interests are human AI collaboration. I want to make AI more accessible to everyone.
Awesome. Yeah. And that kind of sums up what we're doing I'm going to just pop the link in there so that people can check out the Substack that we're working on, but also what we're doing in these masterclasses that we're offering throughout the summer that we're excited about. So we're hoping to see some folks there. We've had a really nice week last week. Lots of people have said, hey, this is really interesting. We're excited to be part of this. And so we're really looking forward to making these available. And we've got our first visitors. Hello, Lita. And last week, when we did our webinar, we had people join us from around the globe. We're hoping that we'll have people from around the globe joining us again. Again, this is on YouTube, this is on LinkedIn, this is also on Substack. You can catch us on any of these platforms, but we're of course very excited for some of our LinkedIn friends here to join us. Okay, so without further ado, today we want to talk a little bit about a post that we've written last week, and that is probably best summarized in this idea of the Eden framework as well as design thinking. So before we go deeper into what Eden is, what is it, Leonard, with those biblical references? Last week we had the 10 Commandments, and now we've got Eden. Oh boy. Anyways, so no, it's an accident. I can tell you that. Like it wasn't anything that we could say is intentional. So what we want to do today, first we want to talk about design thinking. So all UX designers joining us, we're very excited that you're here. You might already know about design thinking, but we want to talk a little bit about how that applies, how we can use that mindset of design thinking and how we can apply that to really good AI prompting. And again, for that, maybe Reza, maybe I can pick your brain a little bit and you can give us an overview of what is design thinking. Like maybe I am new to UX. This field would be something I'm excited about, but I don't really understand the concept of design thinking. And then I also don't really know how to apply that to AI. Let's get started with design thinking. What is design thinking, Reza?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. Design thinking has been around for such a long time, and people have been using it for solving very wicked and complex problems. Many know design thinking just like having these nice sticky notes putting into the walls or the borders, but it is often misunderstood. So design thinking is an ideology, a mindset, a process. So we want that to help us uh, tackle the problems in a human-centered approach. This is the core of what we are doing in the UX. And it's often identified with 5 or 6 steps. We have the empathize step, in which we are trying to understand the people, understand the users, who we are designing for, who are our audiences. And then we have we have to define the problem. What is the problem exactly we are trying to tackle? The problem should be very precise, very meticulous, so that we can know what we want to actually solve. Because this is something that many people don't understand. They just want to approach a problem, solve something, but they don't know themselves what they're wanting to solve. So this is very important to be as precise as possible and be as human-centered as possible when defining the problems. And then we have this ideation step. We are trying to come up with different solutions, how we can answer that problem as the best way we can. And then we have the prototyping, like low fidelity prototypes so that we can put them to test and finally test them with the real users to see what is their feedback, how is it working for them. And it is really in nature an iterative process. So we all the time do this thinking like prototyping, ideation, testing, and the whole procedure is iterated so that we can get the best results. So it's a process. The best, actually, the explanation, in my opinion, is process.
I like that. Process is really the tricky bit a lot of the times, because process means you need to have a bit of a system, right? You need to understand the method behind something. And so being very process oriented, being very system oriented, I think is a really good way to get a deeper understanding of something. And so a lot of the times when we teach UX designers here at the university, one of the things that we notice is there may be a tendency more towards the creative side at the beginning. And then as they go deeper and they understand more about the assignment, about the tasks, they then understand more about the systems that they're building. And the interesting thing is, I think this is part of the UX UI, you could say dichotomy, or you could say the UX UI moniker, that is often criticized by many people, is that UX is not AI. UX is not UI. We already know that, right? Like there's a difference between the experience and the way that you aesthetically and visually present that experience. And so for us, when we're addressing UX designers, despite some of the job descriptions looking for people with CSS experience and stuff like that. That's nice. It's good if you are a UI designer, but a UX designer goes beyond the UI design. You need to understand the processes, the systems, and really try to break down what makes these systems successful. So the thing here is, when we apply this idea of design thinking, then that really helps us get a better understanding of the background behind the system that we're building. And so how do we then apply this process that you talked about, Reza? How do we apply that process to AI prompting? Like, before we reveal Eden, and we've already revealed it, we've already talked about it, but before we go through each of the Eden steps, can you just give me an idea of, like, what's the basic prerequisite that we bring to the table when we're doing this design thinking approach with AI prompting?
So to be honest, I think when we want to combine design thinking with AI field, when it wants to actually be integrated, we can think of it in two ways. One way is to use design thinking for AI, and another way is to use AI for design thinking. So this is something that we are going to talk about it in our masterclass as well. So what is actually it bringing to the table is that empathy, that empathization with the users, end users, and also giving us an opportunity to think beyond our first solution to solving a problem. For example, like design engine, like prompt engineering, it can be approached like a design thinking, like a design problem, right? So some people say that it's just the writing, you're just having words, but no, it's really beyond that. It's a design space. You can really architect your prompt so that it can solve and attack a specific problem. So that empathy, that iteration, not being happy with the first thing that comes to your mind, giving some diversity to your input, that is something that design thinking can bring into the table.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much for summarizing that. So one of the things that I think is really important from our end then, when we're approaching this as an artifact creation process, then how do we envision sort of a product, something that comes out of this interaction that we get from prompting. Because like a lot of people will reach out and they say, if I'm a UX writer, if I'm writing the lorem ipsums of the world, then sure, I can see how generative AI can really be useful and then can help me move forward there. But what if I'm building wireframes? What if I'm thinking about design systems? What if I want to sort of create some rules, and like what if I do want to think about some of the creative outlets of this job? Do you have ideas of how that
How this
that thinking
integration can
applies?
happen?
Yeah, like how because people often see the output. Again, they focus on that output of like the interface or whatever, but they don't really see how do I get from thinking and approaching and having that empathy and like understanding all of this towards the bigger picture of, hey, let's get engaged with the interface, with that human technology interface. Any
Yeah.
tips for that?
As I said also in the beginning, so design thinking is actually a mindset, a process. So, and I think that is the biggest strength of design thinking. Like when you are actually trying to do prompt engineering for UX tasks, it gives you that flexibility to not confine yourself to your biases or your maybe subjective opinions. It gives you an opportunity to go a step beyond and look at the problem with the problem space, what you want to solve, or even the problem engineering itself with a fresh perspective. I think in my opinion, that fresh perspective, the outlook that design thinking gives to us is what we really need to uh, get here. And that's where actually it creates value for us as.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that's really important for us to kind of think about, okay, so what is that value? So let's break down this idea of Eden, right? Like you did this post 2 days ago about Eden: empathize, define, explore, navigate. What's the Eden framework? How do we break each of these steps down?
So Eden is pretty much the adaptation of design thinking for prompt engineering. We were thinking it would be really nice to have a mapping between the design thinking and what we want to do as UX designers and researchers in this field. Uh, so for the empathizing part, I think that it is important to think about what is this prompt going to do really, and whose problem it is going to solve. So this gives us an opportunity to think about the end users, right? So what is the task we are specifically trying to tackle with? And also think about the stakeholders, because sometimes we are, for example, me myself as an engineer, we want to also see who are the stakeholders, what do they need, right? It's not just the end users. So it's a like this composite collective setting that we want to actually prepare to satisfy different groups of people. So for me, empathization is to just bringing the ideas from all of these people, putting them together and coming up with the best ideas for the next part, like problem definition, ideation, and the rest of it. What do you think, Leonard?
I think that's really good. To me, of course, the biggest thing that any sort of value proposition, whether you're a designer or whether you're a creator of other things, rest upon is really understanding the problem, right? Like this is something that I teach in class as well. Is a lot of the times we are so solution centric. We look at the output, we look at the thing that we want, we have the goal in mind, I guess goal orientation, but we're not so well versed in the problem. So we're not really completely understanding what's the problem, how can we get a better idea of that problem. So I think empathizing, this first step, is a really good way of understanding that context that you're in and understanding that specific person that you're working for, the audience essentially. And it really helps you understand in detail why that problem matters, right? Because it's so much more than just understanding the problems, also like understanding how does that problem matter to us? How can we like
And
get
also,
a
this is
better
very
view?
important. This is very important because we, in no way, want to replace AI with replace human voice with AI, right? So
Yeah.
human voice should always be there at the core of our design, at the core of our development. The human voice should always be present there. We are just actually using AI to help us see what are the gaps, what is missing, and what can be augmented to this
Yeah.
whole thing. Otherwise, we are not actually suggesting to use AI to just create the what is the opinion of the group. We want to design a product for them. No, in not at all. We just want to actually help us to augment this vision and have a better understanding about what our users, end users, and stakeholders are thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and regarding that, we also had this question here that came in from Shahab Bedin. Sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly. Is essentially asking how can we reach a consistent understanding? I mean, this relates to this understanding bit, or build a consensus among the different perspectives and sometimes very conflicting end user feedback that we get during design thinking workshops, especially in the context of prompt engineering here, right? And I think I'll let you speak to this as well, but I think it really boils down to having good synthesis techniques. And to me, sometimes that is related to building concept maps. The people that follow me on social media know that I try to explain things visually a lot of the times, mapping out a concept and really breaking down how concept A relates to concept B. And so if you get different perspectives, ideally you open a Miro board, you put the different perspectives in there as post-its, and then you attempt some sort of mapping between the different perspectives that you have. So I would start with like visualizing, Venn diagramming it a little bit, and really kind of seeing, okay, how does this relate to one another? Might be very messy connections at the beginning, and then to try and harmonize these perspectives, right? And for that, we can of course go back to our LLMs. And once we have sort of the perspectives, I mean, you could also just run a traditional Brown and Clark's thematic analysis and create the themes coming out of that. Either way, whether you do affinity mapping or thematic analysis, whatever you have to create sort of clusters of understanding, or different clusters of the feedback that you're getting, that's what you would then feed to the LLM and ask for harmonization strategies. So I would really go back and forth a little bit, as in like, okay, so here are these different viewpoints, and ask for perspectives or thoughts on those different viewpoints. It will come back with some suggestions. You can then reprompt again, and in that dialogue, essentially try and get a better idea of how you can synthesize that. Because at the end, it's about synthesis of conflicting viewpoints. What are your thoughts on that, Reza?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to emphasize here that we always need to have our end users and users and really just talk to them, try to understand their perspective, what they want. This is super, super important, and we should not really ignore that. But of course,
Yeah.
AI can really help us, but that human touch is important. Uh, like actually, if there are conflicts between different actually users, end users, stakeholders, AI can give us solutions, some suggestions. Especially, for example, you can say, okay, use a chain of thought to tackle this problem, put yourself in the shoes of these actually roles, give us some suggestions, but you always need to get back to users, ask them if this is working for you, if this is really the situation, what are your thoughts about this problem. So that's what comes to my mind right now, off the top
Yeah,
of my
yeah.
head.
No, I like that. And I think a lot of the times, just a bunch of folks have joined us saying hello. But a lot of the times we're kind of stuck on having the right tool, or, having the right system. Sometimes it's really probing and trying it out that gets us there. So essentially, in this case, having a framework like Eden, where it's like, okay, so here are the different steps: empathize, define, explore, navigate, kind of helps us go through these different steps, and we can then apply that to a multitude of different approaches, essentially. And another question that came in, but I don't think it's popped up in our system here yet, is also from Amir about what the best AI-driven mind mapping tool is to facilitate design thinking and more informed prompt engineering. I don't think there's really, best mind mapping tools. You can ask any LLM to create a structured markdown output, which you can then feed into tools like MarkMap is one of those tools. There are some other mind mapping tools, but a lot of the times asking for a structured markdown breakdown will allow you to import this markdown breakdown into different visualization tools, even Draw.io. You can then ask the markdown to be converted into mermaid syntax. You can import the mermaid syntax into Draw.io, and you have a really nice overview. Or you could use Excalidraw, another free tool where you can import the syntax really quickly. So essentially what we're asking is, and this is actually an interesting approach when you're working with LLMs. A lot of the times designers, so here's the warning for designers: you don't need to run always to the next big AI LLM or AI powered design tool, because a lot of the times these things are just wrappers on the output that you get from an LLM, and they just kind of eliminate like a couple of steps in between and get you directly to that visual output. Take, for example, Napkin AI, right? Like Napkin AI is one of those tools. You can input something, it will generate a nice visualization for you, and that's kind of neat. But a lot of the times you can ask for that structured output from the LLM, and then you can put that in a program that will interpret it, and that will allow you to create a visual output that is then quite satisfying. So, for example, if we're taking this mermaid output, we can put it into all these different formats that then give us these box drawing tools that we can easily connect. We could export it. We could even, so here's another example. We could even ask Claude to generate it as an SVG. We get the SVG file, which, as you know, is just an XML structure, essentially. So just text, basically. But we save it as an SVG. We can import it in tools like Affinity Designer or Illustrator, and then we can work with that SVG, because now we have sort of a vector format that we can clean up and that we can generate things with. So at the end of the day, you're just kind of looking for that intermediary output, whether it's XML or it's LaTeX, right? Like we've done a lot of stuff with TIX and other languages where you can also draw really nice boxes and flowcharts and diagrams and things like that. So not to go off on a complete tangent, but there's a lot of ways that you can work with text output that you're getting from an LLM that can actually create a draft for you that you can design off of. And then, you'll just take it from there and you just build the next thing. So yeah, I guess that kind of hopefully answer that. Did you have anything to add, Reza?
Nothing. That's pretty much it. But I also would maybe use ChatGPT or other LLMs to generate some items like ideas, and then feed them to Python if people are comfortable with Python,
So
and
true,
just maybe generate beautiful diagrams or mind maps and stuff like that.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting point that you're bringing up here, because 10 years ago, we had this thing like everyone needs to be a coder, or it was all about like getting kids to understand coding better. Now you just need to be good enough to understand the basics of coding to know where things go plug and play. And, you can probably learn that even with some of these tools rather quickly. Like I'd say, like in a week, you could have a basic understanding of how do I take this code output and put it in that thing. And then, we can go from here to there. And again, this is something that we're also chatting about in our masterclass, because some people have asked us. So I'm just going to put that in here as well, that people were curious about. So we sold out last week. Amazing response. Thank you again, everyone that just signed up for it right away. We sold out. It's a pretty small masterclass, but we're offering it again in a month from now. So at the end of June, and there's still spots left, but they're going pretty quickly. So if this is something that you're interested in getting the exact strategy, it's quite easy. Just sign up and and join us for that masterclass. Okay, but let's go back to Eden, Reza. Let's let's walk through the other steps of the Eden framework. And so, where were we? We were like empathize, define, framing the
Exploring.
problem. Uh, yeah, exactly. Framing the problem before prompting, looking at the audience, and then exploring. What's this iterative stuff that is so important in design, in UX design?
Yeah, we shouldn't be happy with our first solution. So this
Yeah,
Explorer gives us a chance to really see what else we can do with our prompts. Someone might ask, actually, why does it matter? So for example, if a prompt is just what day is today, it doesn't look very serious, right? It's just
yeah,
like, why does it matter to explore? But if you are doing actually system design or system work or something larger at a scale, then it becomes really important feature that we need to have in our minds to do the exploration,
yeah,
because we don't want to waste our time, we don't want to waste our precious tokens in the systems, and this is very, very important for us to actually do the exploration. And there are some very nice techniques here, because you and me, we are also from the working in academia, and we are reading lots of papers. So I've noticed that many papers these days are recommending something called the ensemble method, and
yes.
recommending
Let's talk
that.
about that
Yeah,
ensemble.
it's very
Yeah,
interesting for me. So it's very important to have this ensemble mindset when we are doing the prompt engineering. This ensemble mindset is, I think, a term borrowed from machine learning, because there we also have ensemble learning. And that is the idea. There is basically we are training different multiple base models for doing same task or solving a same problem. And then we are combining the results generated by all of these models in hope that actually we get a better result, right? So if we actually have
yeah.
several people, we are putting all of our minds together, hopefully we can actually get a better outcome. So the idea is also similar here. So we can use ensemble approach for maybe designing different roles for solving a problem in UX, like saying that, what do you think a UX writer would think, or what do you think how a software engineer would approach this problem, how would a coder approach this problem, like. And then at the end, you're always checking for the consistency in the outcomes, for the best outcomes. Some people do major voting, like actually say that, AI, put yourself in the place of these many people, like 5 different roles. And then at the end, for making a decision, for solving a problem, we do a major voting. Whatever vote actually has the major vote, we are actually going with that decision. But of course, human supervision is also always necessary. We don't need to emphasize that. We always need actually some UX designer, a human there to do the supervision. But it is very good. And there are also different approaches to this ensemble prompting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just limited to the role-based ensemble actually prompting. For
Because
example,
we all
right?
know the role-based prompting, right? Like we
Yeah.
talked about this idea of act as at the beginning and giving the AI a
Mhm,
role, and that way,
mhm.
understanding the ensemble. But I think what you're saying here is like give a couple, like ensemble, like give a couple of roles. Is that something that we can do, or is
Yeah.
it just like, yeah,
Yeah,
okay, so
just
we
actually
can,
like you're
yeah,
having like this different hats, like
yeah,
the hat of a coder, the hat of a, I don't know, UX writer, UI designer, and then
yeah,
all of these, as if you're actually having a virtual meeting with AI, different roles, and then you are coming up with a final solution or final decision for whatever you want to do. And then this is also not final, because we also have this navigation step and the testing part. But this actually gives you a very good chance to see the actually different ways you can solve the problem and find the solutions for for the thing you want to solve. And as I was saying, actually there are different approaches. Like, 3 major actually categories here. Maybe people are discussing in academic venues
yeah,
is model ensembling. Like we have different LLMs, like you have the cloud, you have Gemini, you have ChatGPT, right?
mm-hmm,
So you can actually gather all of the outcomes generated from each of these models, put them together, and come up with a better decision. And one of the good platforms, honestly, for me, that I'm using it very often on a daily basis is
yeah,
platform. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it
Oh,
correctly.
yeah,
Yeah,
POE, yeah,
yeah,
Poe.com.
POE. Yeah,
Really
that's
nice
actually
to get
good.
all the different
Right?
LLMs under
So you
one
have
hat.
actually a
Yeah, yeah.
different uh, collection of different LLM tools, and you can like talk to each of them, see what their opinions are. And then there's also another category of ensembling method that is focused on prompting, like
Hmm.
prompt ensembling. You're generating different prompts, and then you're actually feeding to the same LLM. And this time you're again aggregating the outcomes to see which one fits the best for solving a problem. And finally, there's also another ensemble method that is focused on outcome. The prompt is the same, LLM is the same, but you also know, because all of these underneath, they're working with probabilistic distributions, right?
Yeah.
So each time it's generating something new, and at the end, again, you're combining them and selecting the best outcomes for your problem.
So what do we have? Let's summarize this again.
Mhm.
We got sort of the initial ensemble, which is the
Role-based ensembling,
role-based ensemble. Then we have
model
model
ensembling,
ensemble, and then we have output,
prompt
right?
prompt
Prompt
ensembling,
ensemble and output
and
ensemble.
output ensembling. Yeah,
So
exactly,
four
exactly.
steps, yeah. So okay, so that's really interesting, and then we can essentially we can combine, we can sort of mix and match, right? So we can
Mm.
uh, change a couple of variables here in the way that we have the roles. Then we can use the same LLM, and then we can change different outputs and kind of see
Mhm.
how we can work with the outputs. Or the thing that I always do is the different model ensembles, which is essentially I have a very strict prompt, but then I run it through different models, and then I kind of use this going forward. And I think one of the nicest techniques that you can learn and understand there is you can use things like Perplexity AI, for example, which recently introduced that labs feature. I don't know if anyone has seen that and tested that out yet. It's sort of an agentic way of doing search, and I really love it because it gives you these deep structured reports, like basically takes deep search to or deep research to a next level. And so you get a really structured output. So that's my output that I'm getting. And then I mix and match that output, right? Like I use that output in different LLMs to help me structure prompts. And then with those prompts, I then see which LLM gives me the best output. Usually, it's if it's like a big input, I have to go to Gemini just because of the huge context window. So let's say I'm generating like 3 or 4 of these reports on how to do something. Like it's a task that's like a scientific task or something that's really difficult to do. So I need like very detailed instructions. So then I will go to AI Studio from Google. I will use these reports as sort of my context that I'm giving here, and then I will work with Gemini 2.5 to create a really elaborate prompting structure, which I then test with Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini to see which gives me the best. And specifically when it comes to writing things, I still default to Claude. Like it's still really good for writing, but it's also really good for these little artifacts that we said earlier, like if you need mermaid diagrams, if you need an SVG, if you need a ticks figure that you can insert into LaTeX or things like that. Claude is really good at structuring that. But if I need to fix something, then I usually go back into ChatGPT 04 Mini High, I guess, because that is really good at fixing code errors. So, like it's usually like, this model ensembling is what's helping me to get quicker to the thing that I need to do, and that's really, I think, a real trick, right? Like really
And
good.
I also want to add a point here. So, again, based on the papers I've been studying, so this approach also helps with reducing the biases. Just think of it.
Yeah.
So you're asking different models to generate the outcome. It definitely helps with reducing the biases, because we know that all of the models, they have their inherent biases. There's no way actually you can say that some model is a bias immune and they don't have biases. No, all of them have, but actually asking all of these models work next to each other, it can to some extent help reduce the biases in the
Mm.
outcomes. So that's one of the advantages that comes to my mind.
Yeah, let's talk about these biases for a second, because we had another question that came in from Shahbedin again, saying when it comes to important areas like healthcare or policy making, like super important areas for society, right? Should prompt engineering be approached as an academic and research-based activity, or is it more effective when developed in a business and technical context? And I think that's a really nice way to think about prompt engineering. If we think about the academic side of things, which is, of course, where both of us are at home, these techniques that we've talked about before, like chain of thought prompting and few shot learning, are basically techniques that are coming out of the research world, right? Like it's a way to systematically validate the outputs of the LLM that you're getting, specifically if you do the chain of thought thing. And the few shot learning thing is also really interesting because you do in a few shots and then see how the model learns and how it propagates essentially. But the problem is essentially we need the ethical frameworks, which a lot of people criticize that as like, where's the training data coming from? How many ethical things have been breached to even train these models? And, that's, I think, something that everyone has to be aware of, that there, was some sort of overstepping that happened at the beginning. But that's a whole different discussion that we can have at a different point in time when it comes to copyright and things like that, because for that, we have to understand actually, like, where does copyright come from? Why is it a thing? Because ever since the beginning of time, people have exchanged ideas and knowledge in a way that really helped them advance knowledge. Only in sort of the more industrial age, when people understood that you can charge for knowledge, did copyright become a thing, because then it became about like who's charging money for the thing that came out of it. And now we're kind of in this semi-democratized world where, so for knowledge generation or for the models, like people can charge again, but for operating the models, like almost now, that's the skill that people will be able to charge for in the future, I think, which is just like, how do we get to the best and most valid bits of knowledge? And that's specifically related, I think, to domain-specific knowledge. So when you're asking about healthcare or policy making, that's really domain-specific, right? So you want to if you're prompting, you want to have an expert in the room that understands differential diagnosis, for example, in healthcare, so that you can make sure that there's clinical expertise that's actually being reflected. And you might know some of these studies that are already looking into that. Some of the LLMs are getting pretty good at diagnosing or helping with the diagnosis, but as we emphasized earlier, there always needs to be a human in the loop. There needs to be a human in the room that kind of helps us understand some of these outputs and helps us get to some of these things. So understanding this bit about how do I interpret the output and also how do I reproduce it, right? There was a colleague from user research, Dr. Payne. She posted on LinkedIn her approach for how she tried to validate different sort of thematic analysis approaches based on Brown and Clark in the prompt. So she had a very specific validated prompt where she tried to generate different thematic analysis, which is currently, the gold standard that we're trying to, like, LLMs should be good at that, right? Like getting the different quotes together. But it turns out there is too much variety in the output, because she had, I think she ran a design thinking workshop and there was like 10 people in that workshop. And so the output was too varied, even though everyone used exactly the same prompt and had exactly the same data set that they fed into the LLM. But then once they plotted their outputs in a mirror board and compared it, there was not as much consensus as if it would have been done by a couple of humans and through the process that you usually do affinity mapping or thematic analysis in general. So this is something to keep in mind, that there is still a good amount of variability that comes from these LLMs. So like understanding that variability, I think, is super important. And really understanding what that means for your output and how much you can trust that output is where you still need the experts. You can't just go to the LLM and just do that thing. So if you're prompt engineering, you can't just put the prompt in. Like if you are at a company and you would make that decision as like, all we need to do is just hire a good prompt engineer and then they will just come up with some of these outputs and fix it for us. I don't think that's the right way to do it. You still need an expert in the room. You need that peer review almost of the LLM output so that you can validate some of the output and that you can come up with better, excuse me, with better ways of structuring that output and making sure that you can actually trust it. Now, in the business sense, things are more important when they come to improving the workflows so that you make something more usable. For example, patient responses, administrative tasks like billing tasks in a hospital or something like that. If you think about this kind of idea of optimizing workflows, then I think there's absolutely a really good opportunity here for prompt engineers to optimize some of these workflows. And I think that's what we're currently seeing. We're seeing optimization of a lot of tasks and a lot of workflows that can be done even without the domain knowledge that you would need for the academic way of implementing things. And so you still need to test that with like real world users. But in theory, you could have somebody write like some pretty slick custom GPTs, or even like slick versions of projects if you're all using the same LLM. That would then make it really easy to deal with certain things. Like as an example, this is not from healthcare or policy making, but as an example, the university has a lot of policies. We could feed all of those policies into a custom GPT instead of having them sit on our website where it's an absolute pain to go through all the policies. And then that custom GPT, if a faculty has a question about like, does that hit policy X? We could easily look it up, right? Like the sort of needle in the haystack thing would work really well if we sort of had this policy GPT. I'm like, so which University of Waterloo policy has that thing? And we'd be able to find that really quickly instead of having to go through hundreds of policy documents and updating them and stuff. So I think for knowledge bases, this is a really powerful way of integrating some of these things, and makes it really easy. Yeah, Reza, did you have anything to add? I again
Uh,
went off on a
Not
tangent.
really. You covered everything, but yeah, again, for the healthcare and policy, or also even education, because these are very sensitive topics, that domain knowledge is super important, and we should trust that. That's why
Yeah.
we always need that human supervision to be present there. And one of the concerns here that I want to bring up is the ethical concerns. Like we cannot really, like other areas, freely share the samples or data points with the AI to learn from, right? So
Mm.
because last week we talked about this in context learning, in which we were providing prompts with samples and examples to learn from. Here in the healthcare and policymaking and even education, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
So we should actually approach it with more care. And I would say, uh, like having a balance in how we are approaching them. Like we need to have domain knowledge and maybe evidence-based, research supported decisions, and also the best practices coming from the business and industry actually part. All of these together, then it
Mhm.
can probably generate the best outcome, in my
Yeah.
opinion. It's just
Yeah, yeah.
my
Well,
opinion.
well,
My
yeah, for
opinion.
sure, right? Like,
Mhm.
but I do think there's a difference if we're like actually producing an outcome that is like inside of the domain versus tangential. Like it's a part of the UX bit of the tangential bit, the administrative bits. So I think those are much easier to deal with than some of these ones that really just require this deep knowledge. So yeah, I just appreciate that question. So thank you to everyone. And of course, feel free, if you got more questions, feel free to always pop those into the chat. We'll be monitoring that, and we're obviously open to answering some of these for you as well. Okay.
Leonard, do you want to also talk a bit about navigation and testing?
Yes, let's go to let's finish Eden.
Okay.
So the Garden of Eden.
Mhm.
So exploring, and then navigation, right? So
Mhm.
testing the prompts. So again, we were empathize, define, explore, that's EDE, and now we're at N, navigate, which is testing your prompts in real or representative contexts, right?
Mhm.
So you want to know, does the output align with the goals that you have, and does it actually help? Now, this is super interesting because this is really what we do as user researchers whenever we're creating something, is we want to understand, hey, is this thing that we build, is that actually something that you want? Is that actually something that you desired in the first place? So This is where this navigational testing bit comes in, where we want to, like, a lot of the times AI prompting is a very solitary process. We're prompting for ourselves, but like if we're building AI systems, which is essentially the next step for UX designers that really want to dominate their job, right? Like they go from I'd say like phase one is you write the prompt so that you become more effective at your job. Phase two, and again, I'm just going to point up here to the masterclass, which is the thing that we also want to show you in the masterclass, is once you've optimized the productive bit, you go into the bit that lets you build a system that the team can then use, lets you build something that you can use in a company context. So for that, it's, I think, really important to look at how will other people get value from that thing that I built. And for that, you have to test it. You have to test it with the people, because something that might work for you and your own knowledge might not work for that other person. And then, of course, you have to go back to the prompt. You have to tweak it. And here's the other thing that I actually did that in my AI class that I taught last year for the students learning generative AI. I had them try and build custom GPTs for each other, which they then had to try and break. This is always a lovely activity. Those of you that know our book Games User Research, they know that this is a similar approach that we did for testing games. Essentially, you bring somebody in and try to break the game. And so in this case, you bring somebody in and try to break the prompt to see, will it ever give me something that I actually don't desire as an output? And this is interesting because then you have to go back into your prompt and you have to refine the bits and pieces in simple if-then statements, right? Like you can add, like in programming, this would be error handling, right? Like in programming, if we have a programming mindset, we would approach this as error handling, which is essentially, if this happens, then do that response. And so you can do that in a similar way, just in natural language. When you're working with the prompt, you can go back into the prompt and in the natural language say, hey, but if the user is trying to get to these bits, and you can be a bit more fuzzy, which is nice about LLMs. If they're trying to get to these bits, this is the desired response that you should try and bring forward. Yeah. Breather, is that kind of what you had in mind with that, Eden, as well? Did I summarize
Yeah,
that well, or?
yeah, that's actually perfect. And but I also was thinking that prompt evaluation itself is a very sophisticated field. Like
Yeah.
we see in all of these conferences, they are trying to find the best approaches to see which prompt is the most optimal
Yeah.
prompt for solving a problem. As you said, it also depends on the task. For example, imagine that we have a prediction task, or I don't know, text annotation. For each of these, we need to go see if the prompt actually does the job we expect it to do, and to what extent it is good. And what design thinking here also brings to the table is we also need to think if that is human centered. And by that, it's just not a rhetoric, and we really mean to see if it is solving the problem of a human, if it is solving a problem of a stakeholder, if it is solving a problem of us as prompt engineers, or maybe UX designers. So that human aspect itself is also very important to be considered in the evaluation of prompts. So the task, human centeredness, I don't know if it is a word or not, but
Human centeredness.
centeredness, yeah.
We're making it work.
Yeah, I just coined it up. But yeah, these are the things that comes to mind. But also teams, maybe in companies, teams can also gather together and see what are the criterias of a good prompt, especially if they are trying to come up with prompt templates, right? Prompt
Yeah,
templates are very important. People can put them into use for different tasks,
exactly.
different times. So having good prompts at hand could be a very nice tool to like facilitate the jobs and accelerate doing things in UX.
I
So
think, yeah, this is. I think you're hitting a very interesting point here. That is almost like the resurgence of the wiki, right? Like back in the day, we used to collect SOPs and and how-tos and like system procedures, even policies themselves in a wiki. Now, for those that don't know what a wiki is, it's like it's like Media Wiki or Wikipedia. So it's like an editable document where you store knowledge. Now, I do think it's absolutely important. Now, obviously, knowledge-based systems have evolved since then. We got Notion, we got Obsidian, we got some really cool tools out there that help us store knowledge, right? But at the bare minimum, I think like having something like a wiki is super helpful, because then, yeah, somebody comes up with a prompt, they test it, and then the rest of the team can go in and refine it, and you could turn that into a collaborative process of refining the prompts, so that, you know, in the end you get a much better prompt for the organization. And again, like treating the prompt as a tool that everyone can work on. Just imagine you had a pickaxe, and everyone, this is a stupid example, because like pickaxe, what are you going to do with it? Let's say let's imagine it's like a croc shoe, you know, like Joe's croc shoes, and then you got these little pins that you put on the croc shoes, and everyone can put like a little pin on there. Now in this case, the croc shoe is just embellishment, but for us it would almost be more like, okay, now you can put like better profile on it, or you can make it waterproof or something like that. So you could change the items and the properties of that shoe and make it really suitable for the task or the challenges that you're having as a team. And of course, many minds work better than one mind. So again, take that prompt designing process out of the solitary confinement of yourself, you and the AI, to an open team that's all working on improving the prompts as you're all getting better with this. And there's a huge advantage there of the UX team that works together with that. I think the problem is we're currently stuck in this world where everyone is telling us it's going to come for our jobs and eliminate us. But the trick is really to be like, hey, if we all add this, we can all learn ways that helps us set ourselves apart from that. So I said this before, I think in last week's webinar as well. It's like the entry level is disappearing, right? There's no more entry level jobs in the future. So essentially what we all need to become is we need to become strategic thinkers. So if entry level in UX means I'm just building nice little wireframes and pictures, that's good, but you're not doing that anymore. Now you're going to the next level of thinking, okay, so what do I actually need to build, and how can I get more strategy behind that? Like, how can I make that interface or that interaction more pleasant to the humans? How can I bring more knowledge to that bit of
We want to become AI masters eventually.
At the end of the day, that's a good this is where I hit the button. Hold on. At the end of the day, we want to become AI powered UX designers. We want to become masters of the AI, and that's a great way to remind people that that's essentially what we're trying to help you do. We're trying to help you be a master of these techniques, so that then when the boss is kind of thinking about, okay, how can we optimize this thing? Well, here is how you can optimize it, because I already have like all these little tasks that it can do for me, but it doesn't replace me. It just helps me get these tasks done, so that I have a much better time creating these tasks and feeling like I get to be more productive with that approach to it. Yeah. And that really kind of sums up this idea. Like, feel free to pop in any other questions you might have, but that kind of sums up this idea of the Eden framework. Empathize, so that you start with a human context, define, clearly framing the problem before you start the prompting, exploring, iterating over different prompts as you would with design prototypes, and then navigating, testing these in terms of the output with real humans, so that you understand what's going on there. So Eden is a framework that lets you do that. Really happy that we could give you this framework as a way to approach AI prompting with a design thinking mindset that helps you understand how you can make it better, how you can really create prompts that give you a huge advantage over prompts that are very, very simple. So I think that's at the heart of this thing. Another thing, just as a reminder that we covered, always, if you're doing something that is mission critical, always involve a specialist, always involve a stakeholder. Don't just go off and hire a prompt engineer and think you can do that thing, but get a stakeholder in there that can help you and support you with some of these things. and that way you produce better output. And tackle the grunt work tasks first. So tackle the AI, tackle the admin stuff first with AI, so that you can then easily automate some of the admin stuff, like the not so fun stuff, and then get to the harder tasks. You all have seen this meme probably a while ago, where somebody wrote, "Hey, I didn't want AI to write my essays because I love writing. I wanted it to do my laundry and other stuff." So like somebody was like comparing this whole thing, like, oh, now I have more time to do laundry because AI is doing all of my writing. That's kind of the opposite way, right? Like you don't want to do that. You want to automate things like doing laundry or tedious tasks. So you want to automate the administrative, the grunt work tasks, and you want to create space where you can really do more of the thinking tasks, do more of the UX thinking tasks that help you set yourself apart there. I think that kind of really sums up this idea of how to get there. Did you want to add anything, Reza, before we close this off for the day?
No, that's pretty much it. So it was a very interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to explore the details, the technical aspects in our masterclass too.
Yeah. So one more thing that we maybe let's push this thing to the side so that we have our faces in there. But one more thing that I wanted to ask everyone: just let us know in the chat what you currently see as the main challenges that you're dealing with as a UX designer. We'll look at those, and we will reply if you're on LinkedIn or Substack. Like in Substack, feel free to use our chat for our channel. In LinkedIn, feel free to use the chat that's under the live stream here. Just let us know what those challenges are, and we will reply with how we would tackle those challenges with AI, just to give you a teaser of where some of these things could be automated, or we could help you get to do the things that you actually want to do. And then maybe also let us know, what are the things you actually love about doing UX design? What are the things you love about your day job that you don't want to automate? We'd love to hear those too. And then, yeah, we thank you very much for tuning in today. It's good to have you here.
Thank you,
So
everyone.
thank you, everyone. And Reza, are we doing this again next week? Will we
Let's
go
do
live
it.
again?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, one more thing. See you in our Substack as well. You'll get a notifier. You'll follow us on the live stream again next week, same time. We'll pop in there, and we'll be excited to talk more about AI and UX. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.